Welcome to the Thinking Practitioner Podcast,
a podcast where we dig into the fascinating issues, conditions, and quandaries in the massage and myotherapy world today.
I'm Whitney Lowe.
And I'm Tel Luca.
Welcome to the Thinking Practitioner.
Hi, Tel Luca here. Whitney will be back with us next episode. When I was looking for a publisher for a book I wanted to write, I was fortunate to have ended up with two offers, one from a large international media conglomerate and the other from Handspring, which at that time was just a small publisher run by four people with a love of great books and a love of our field. To this day, I'm glad I chose to go with Handspring, as not only did they help me make the books I wanted to share, the Advanced Myofascial Techniques series, but their catalog has emerged as one of the leading collections of professional level books written especially for bodyworkers, movement teachers, and all professionals who use movement or touch to help patients achieve wellness. Handspring has joined with Jessica Kingsley Publishers, Integrative Health, Singing Dragon imprint. So head on over to their website at handspringpublishing.com to check their list of titles, and be sure to use the code TTP, like the Thinking Practitioner, at checkout for a discount. Thanks, Handspring. Sex is an edgy topic and may be particularly difficult.
We're just going to jump right in, eh?
Just going to go for it. May be particularly difficult to talk about in our field, maybe because there are such very good reasons to have crystal clear boundaries around sex and body work, but maybe also because as a profession, we might be, some of us think, might be reacting to the cultural confusion between touch and sex by simply eliminating sex from our discussions and our thinking. And that makes it hard to talk about if we eliminate it. Some of us are starting to talk more openly about what we lose by leaving that out. Maybe we're thinking we've thrown some babies out with the bathwater. Maybe there's a certain amount of ownership we could be doing of intimacy as one of our work's superpowers. And maybe there are things we could learn from writers, thinkers, and professionals who are working openly and clearly in the realms of sexuality. Betty Martin, you are one of those people, and you are the originator of the Wheel of Consent model, which has been enormously influential in sex education, sex therapy, and many other fields. Welcome, Betty.
Thank you. Thank you.
I want to hear from you in a second about a lot of things, but your bio from your book, The Art of Receiving and Giving, says, why would most people endure unwanted or unsatisfying touch rather than speak up for their own boundaries and desires? It's a question of a myriad of answers, and one that Dr. Betty Martin has explored in her 40 plus years as a hands-on practitioner, first as a chiropractor and later as a somatic sex educator, certified surrogate partner, and sacred intimate. So, Betty, I'm so honored and pleased to have you here. And I want to talk about that question. Why would people endure unwanted or unsatisfying touch? And especially, how can we work with that as body workers? But maybe you could tell us a bit more about yourself and your work and your interests and that kind of thing.
Sure. Yeah, that is a great question about why we do that. And I would love to come back there. And I'm going to start, as you suggested, with a little bit about my work. As you heard there, I was a chiropractor for 30 years, so I had my hands on a lot of people and just loved that work. I just loved it. And in my mid-40s, after a divorce, when I was still working as a chiropractor, I took a workshop in sexuality. This one was for women, and it was with the organization called the Body Electric School, who's still around. And it was very physical, very hands-on. It was 2 or 3 days, and it just completely rocked my world as far as how I saw myself and experienced myself as an erotic being, which was that I pretty much had no clue before the workshop. And I met with a group of friends who had also taken that workshop and a couple more, and we explored regularly for a couple of years. And when I tell people about exploring sexuality, they immediately think often, oh, it means you're having a lot of sex. And that's not true if you define sex as intercourse. But we were exploring with movement and breath and sound and touch and things that can awaken your understanding and develop your understanding of yourself, that are not about hooking up with each other. And that's often a difficult idea to get to. But I think what it has in common with body work is that if I'm getting body work from you and I'm on your table, it's not about the connection between you and me. It's about what you're doing to me, and it's about my experience, whether it's pleasant or relaxing or challenging, or we're working in a more therapeutic mode. It's about my experience. It's not about some connection between you and me. And it was similar in these erotic explorations that we did massages on each other and all kinds of stuff. And it wasn't about the hookup. It was about, oh, what is my body capable of? What does it feel like to be this turned on and not do anything with it? What does it feel like to have all these tears and fears and joys and bliss come up? And so it was a lot of that exploring. And after a few years of that, I realized that I was interested in offering that to other people, some of those opportunities. So I closed my chiropractic practice in a small town near Seattle and moved into Seattle and opened up a new studio, and calling myself a sacred intimate and a sex coach, and working experientially with people to help them, number one, learn how to be comfortable in their skin, which is really hard for a lot of people. And number two, how to notice their desires, what they wanted, and communicate them. And I was working with touch because I'm good at touch and I'm very comfortable there. And so, asking people, for example, how would you like, we're completely clothed. How would you like me to touch you right now for just a few minutes as a get acquainted kind of touch? And they would have no idea. Many people would say, oh, I don't know. I'm always the giver. Or, I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. Mm-hmm. Or, well, you're the expert. You should know what to do. Mm-hmm. Or, I don't know. Just do something. And so this happened enough times that I began to wonder, why is it so hard for people to notice the simplest thing of how they might like to be touched for a few minutes? Maybe they, it was really obvious to me, like, oh, I want my head scratched, or I want my hand massaged, or I want my feet rubbed, or I want to be held, or I want to, I want you to stretch my arm this way. Those kind of answers were quite obvious to me, but they weren't for most people. Mm-hmm. And I began to wonder what was going. Oh, and then what would happen if? So they say. So then I would have to sort of coach them and support them in finding something that they wanted. And so, okay, well, you scratch my head, so I'm scratching their head, and they still acted and spoke as if it was for me. Like I was doing something for them, but they felt like they had to go along with something, or they couldn't change their mind, or they couldn't stop when they were done, or they, would say things like, well, the first minute was great, but the next 2 minutes I was wondering if it was okay to say stop. So their actions betrayed the fact that they felt like it wasn't really for them, or that the action was more important than how they felt about it. And so they would sort of make themselves go along with something that wasn't pleasant, which just seems really strange to me. I thought, why? And of course, I do it too. Why do we humans do that? And so this gets to your question of why we humans do that. And I started thinking, well, every one of us is touched against our will in ways that we don't want and we don't like, and we are powerless to stop.
Yeah.
And it happens before you can talk. Universal. You can't get through your first couple of years of life without being touched in ways that you don't want. And it's not just people who have suffered abuse. It's everybody. Even if you had the best parents in the world, you got your diapers changed, you got your teeth brushed, you got picked up out of oncoming traffic,
Right.
And so
put in your car seat, whatever.
Put in your car seat. Oh my God. So we learn how to go along with stuff that we don't like. It is a skill you possess and I possess. And to some degree, we learn that, this thing that's happening is more important than my ability to say no or stop. And so we just go along and go along and go along. And this feels normal. This is what touch is to many people. And I found this in my work with sexuality too, was that people, they didn't know that they had a choice. And when they would find out, I have a choice. Oh my gosh, I didn't know that, or, like I said, going along with something that they don't really want or not really excited about.
Well,
so I think that's where it comes from.
Yeah. And a lot of us recognize those examples, even in a different context.
Yes.
Sounds like your context there in Seattle was a very open one, where it's about you being comfortable in your body, and there's a lot of things that are possible.
Yeah.
Even in the context of a straight ahead bodywork session.
Yes, absolutely.
I recognize all of those responses, all of those questions that come up.
Yeah. I've been on the massage table. When I am paying for somebody for a massage, it's for relaxation and enjoyment.
Yeah.
And they do something that I don't like, and I just keep going. As far as I can tell, we all do that. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's a real art and skill to be able to create the context, create the mood, whatever, where clients feel okay about speaking up.
Absolutely.
And are invited to.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot, like you say, working against it.
Yes.
A lot working in our history,
Absolutely.
but in the context we're in and the culture.
Yeah. And then there's you're the expert. So, I'm here to do what you think is right, which is appropriate in some situations. If I'm going to a surgeon, I'm not going to tell them what to do, they're supposed to know. And the same with many types of body work. The modality that I was using, and my colleagues, the modality isn't the cool stuff that I do to your body. The modality is pleasure. The healing element is the experience of pleasure. And so that is a whole different approach. That's the difference between, the body work that most of your folks are doing and working with pleasure, because the experience of pleasure neurologically and chemically in the body changes you. It changes the way you think. It changes your perspective. It engages the pleasure centers of the brain, and and it heals. Yeah.
The pleasure itself is healing.
Pleasure itself is healing. Yeah.
On the emotional level, but you're talking about on the physiological level and the neurological level, all those levels.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
And in your role, in your profession, you're taking a stand for that. You're saying that's what we do.
Yes, that's what we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's I think most of us on this side of that line would say, Yeah, we recognize that. That's important too, of course. That's a big part of what we do.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a little complicated to stand for in the same way. I think there's
Oh,
more
yes,
answers.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
thinking back to my chiropractic days, that's not someplace I would or could go or was interested in going, or no. It's a whole different thing.
Right.
A whole different thing. And
Well,
it's important too.
yeah.
It's very important.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm thinking about my early training as a rolfer, where it wasn't supposed to feel bad,
Mhm.
but the way it felt was not my primary concern. In
Yes,
that straight
exactly.
ahead view.
Exactly.
And the clients presenting symptoms were also not my primary concern, nor what they requested or what they wanted. I had a
Right.
pretty clear model of what I was
Right.
going to
Yeah.
do. So
And
there's-
that's an important way to work.
Huh.
I mean, if I'm coming to you for rolfing, that's what I'm paying you for.
Yeah.
To see
That's
those
the
things.
contractor thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A good point.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And yet I mean, my early training was in other kinds of work that felt really good. I was there at the Esalen Institute on staff. So it was all about the senses and
Yeah.
awakening the full range of experience and awareness.
Yeah.
So then when I went to the Rolf Institute to train,
Heck,
I'm
maybe
like,
we
oh
met.
my God. It's like these people don't know a thing about touch. And from my point of view,
Yeah.
from that
Yeah.
point of view of like, this needs
Right.
to at least feel decent.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
really, it became my kind of personal mission. I eventually got hired there and taught there for 20 years, with that being the mission being, we can do this work and not have it feel so bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
To do that.
Yeah. Good for you.
Well, there's so many questions about your work and this context we're talking about. You've talked about the relationship between pleasure and healing. What about the difference between intimacy and sex, or how you define sex, or how we sort that out if we need to?
Well, sex, most people think of it as intercourse, or at least something involving an orifice or other.
Yeah.
And involving the genitals. And that's a decent definition, but it's a little short of what actually happens and what's actually possible. It's possible to have sex without touching genitals. It's possible to have sex without being in the same room. So I think of sex as the presence of your arousal and you're choosing to act on it. And if it involves someone else, which it doesn't always, if it involves someone else, they are also choosing to act on their arousal.
Interesting. So the presence of my arousal, my decision to act on it, and if it involves somebody else, the same on their side.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then you might, intercourse might be an option, but you might also dance and sing and read sexy stories and, make out and give each other erotic foot rubs. And all kinds of things can happen.
And that's all sex.
And I consider that all sex. Yeah.
Okay.
I realize legally that's not how sex is defined. I realize that. But I'm in the business of helping people learn how to enjoy themselves more. So it's a broader definition.
Nice.
Legally, of course, it's a different story. So sex in that meaning has, it's implied that you're both enjoying it and there's something for you there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's primarily a physical, mental activity. Intimacy, I think of as being close to someone in a way that you reveal yourself. I am intimate with my bookkeeper financially, but not sexually. I'm intimate with my lover sexually, but not financially. I may be intimate emotionally with my best friend, but not financially or sexually. So intimacy is one of those words that is often a euphemism for sex,
Uh-huh.
but it's a different thing. And you can have sex that is not at all intimate. You can have
Okay.
intimacy that is not sexy.
Yeah.
Lots of people have sex that's not intimate.
What about physical intimacy?
Well, I think you could be physically intimate. I mean,
Yes.
in a way, I'm physically intimate with my physician because he knows my body, but I'm not sexually intimate.
So it's that revealing aspect.
I think of it as if we're intimate, I can see parts of you that you don't show to other people, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
So we can be emotionally intimate without being sexually intimate. And we can be phically intimate without being sexually intimate.
Okay, that's what I'm trying to tease apart too. Yeah.
I think a lot of people conflate those two, and it's unfortunate because different people have different experiences emotionally with the same activity. You know, I may meet with my lover and we, make out and play, mess around and have a great time. And I feel, oh my God, so intimate. And my lover's like, yeah, that was fun. Whatever, or vice versa. It doesn't mean that one of those is wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's because we're two human beings and we have different experiences, to have different inner experiences. And I think it's helpful to recognize that, we are different human beings.
We're different human beings and we're in different roles. And in the context of this podcast and the work people do here, there is, I think, an enormous amount of intimacy.
Oh, yes.
On the client side, on both sides, really.
Yeah.
And it's within that context, within that realm.
My body worker is going to see sides of me that other people don't. I mean, quite literally, probably.
Right.
Yeah.
And then in that intimacy, and I'm just thinking of the sacred term you use, there's a kind of reverence or certainly a respectfulness and an understanding of the vulnerability there, but also a specialness and an elevation and a meaning aspect that we can bring
I think so.
table.
Yeah. And of course, you're all drunk on oxytocin, so
right. Altered state.
You're in an altered state because you've been on the table for an hour, like, oh. Yeah. Or you've been focusing on this person's and your client's experience, and you get in the zone. Of course you do. Thank goodness,
Right.
Okay,
so here's a question I'm trying to formulate. It's what are the vulnerabilities you see us body workers having by virtue of our role or these, the position we're in? How do we get set up for confusion?
That's a good one. Well, I think a couple of ways. One is that for most people, touch and sex are conflated. So anytime touch is anywhere in the room, my mind goes to, okay, sex is also in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really important to deconflate those because they're not the same. Absolutely. But for many people, as soon as touch is about to happen, they get a little aroused, which is fine because you get over it, So I think there's that confusion for people, clients mostly. So that they have a wonderful experience on your table and then they think they're in love with you. Yeah, that happens. I'm guilty of that. So, and I think another part of it is the natural power imbalance. Anytime you're seeing a practitioner, whether it's a physician or a teacher or a professor or a body worker, you're going to hold him up to certain, you're going to hold him up to a certain,
pedestal stature
or something. Yeah. And it's also the fact that if I'm on the table, there you do have certain power over me, just in a very tangible physical way.
The physical modeling of the situation.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
So there's the power imbalance that is inherent.
Mm-hmm.
There's also the power imbalance that is all in my head as the client. And they make a potent combination. And so if you, as the practitioner, if you have any degree of questioning your boundaries, or, you think I'm kind of cute, any little kind of chink in the armor, I'm going to jump right in. So that is a risk of this kind of work. And I imagine all of your practitioners are well aware of that. And I imagine they've all been schooled in don't go there, of course.
Hopefully so,
and,
yeah.
And it's very important that you don't go there, because the client is extremely vulnerable in multiple ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's you're describing the state that happens for the client of looking up the in the physically in the room, in the relationship, and seeing our wonderfulness because of the context. And then from the practitioner side, there's the trap of believing it, or not just necessarily believing it, but of just believing only that, maybe. Saying, okay, so maybe I am pretty.
I'm
or,
hot stuff.
Whatever.
I mean, look at this cool stuff I'm doing to you. Right? Aren't I cool?
That's right.
Yeah, I've been
Look how
there.
good you feel afterwards.
Most of us have been there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And unfortunately, to some degree, our work, well, let's see, that's not unfortunate, but our work is largely very pleasant. We enjoy our work. We love our work. And so it makes it easy to draw some kind of satisfaction from our work. And I hope your work is satisfying. Absolutely.
Right.
And it's easy to kind of eroticize that satisfaction a little bit. Hopefully we don't do it, and hopefully if it does happen, it's extremely rare. But it is easy. And particularly if our own personal, sensual, and erotic life is not satisfactory. So, if you have a partner, hopefully you're having a wonderful time with your partner. If you don't have a partner, or even if you do, at least get a relaxation massage regularly so that your tank is full, so that you don't need your clients in order to fill up your tank of worthiness, of sensuality, of I'm a good person, I deserve to live on the planet at this time, all those meanings that we draw from our work. And I can relate to this. I imagine many of your people can relate to this. If you don't work for a while, your hands get kind of hungry. You're like, oh, I just want to get my hands on somebody because it's just, just so satisfying, and it feels so good, and it's connecting, and if you don't have a source of sensual enjoyment and physical enjoyment, not necessarily sexual, but just physical and sensual enjoyment, it's going to be very easy to kind of drink that in with your clients, and that doesn't work.
That's great. So we have like professional continuing education requirements. It would be the wrong thing to do, but it makes me think we also need like pleasure requirements.
Yes, right. Yes.
How many hours of pleasure have you managed to accomplish
right.
this year? Yeah.
And pleasure that's all about you. I mean, it's
Right.
great that you're having a good time with your sweetie.
Uh-huh.
And you need pleasure and enjoyment that is only for you. I learned this when I was in my chiropractic days. If I didn't get a massage every week or two, I was ragged, emotionally just ragged. And it had nothing to do with sex. It had nothing to do with, it was just, I needed an opportunity to be tended to and cared for the way I was caring for other people.
Yeah.
Of course, we need that, you know?
Right.
And if it's physical and sensory, all the better. Yeah.
That's that really resonates with me. And for sure get our intimacy needs met, but also it's your wheel of consent model lays it out in a very clear way that I saw this and I go, oh, I'm living in this part of the wheel.
Mm-hmm.
The part that is touching for someone else's benefit.
Yes.
And there's lots of pleasure and benefit I get from that, but I wasn't moving around the wheel very much. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so easy as a caregiver, as a helper, to be getting all of our, satisfaction from that giving act.
Yeah, it ain't the same.
No.
It ain't the same.
Yep.
I mean, it's great that it's satisfying. That's one of the joys of this kind of work. And in my chiropractic days and later in my sacred intimate days, it is very satisfying work. It's great. Mm-hmm. And it ain't the same.
Yeah.
Get on the table.
Yeah. As an ethical act is a way.
An ethical act. Get on the table and put it in your calendar so that it happens regularly, so that you don't have to figure it out and make an appointment that's different all the time.
Nice.
Like, every Tuesday at 2:00, I am on the table.
Okay. So in your training, which in full disclosure, I just finished. I was so impressed with
Thank you. It was great to have you in the class.
Like a pro training. In your training, you really emphasize the importance of the hands.
Yes.
And how they, in some ways, are a door or a doorway or the opening of the first step.
Yeah.
Process.
Yeah.
Can you say something about that?
Yeah. So the wheel of consent is about distinguishing between who's doing and who it's for. So if I'm touching you, I can touch you for you, or I can touch you for my own enjoyment with your permission, of course, and within whatever boundaries you have set. So I can give you a massage or I can feel you up. Very different experiences and very different. And it's important to notice the difference. Mm. And so when I was working with clients starting to play with this, I noticed it's very difficult for most people to touch someone else for their own pleasure. And for some people, it took some fiddling around and trying it out. And for some people, it's just impossible.
Yeah, for me, for example, I realized that I had so found a way to take that out of my touch, at least energetically from my side, that it was completely uncomfortable and threatening.
It's very common with body workers, and I work mostly with body workers. It's very common for body workers to just not be able to get this brain cell talking to this other brain cell. Like, I can't, I think it's partly because it's already pleasant. And what you don't realize is there's another layer. Yeah. So I was working with this one person, this a couple of decades back, and trying to get him to be able to touch. He was touching my arm, and I was sort of coaching him with feel for the shape, feel for the texture, feel for the warmth, just kind of trying to get him to be able to feel my arm for his own enjoyment. and he couldn't do it. And I looked over.
Goes against so
Yeah,
much.
he couldn't do it. And I looked over next to me on the counter was a river stone that had these kind of nice textures.
Okay.
And I thought, I said to myself, aha, let's see what he does if there's no one to please. Like what? So I picked up the stone, I put it in his hand. I said, feel this. And he couldn't feel that either. He knew it was a stone, but he couldn't take in any of the sensation. He couldn't take in it just like it wasn't clicking, wasn't going in anywhere. And that was a big aha for me, because that made me realize, oh, it's not that he can't feel an arm, it's that he can't feel anything. His hands are just not hooked up to his brain, in a certain way.
In a certain way.
So we played with that, and I started playing with that with other clients. And then I noticed what a big deal it was for most people, for many people. And so now I do it with everybody. But there's a video on YouTube called Waking Up the Hands. You can see me taking people through this.
We'll link that in the show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. It's when I take an object in my hands and feel it. And feel is the accurate verb here, because to feel means you touch something for the purpose of taking in information and perhaps pleasure. So in our work, we call it palpate. You're probably very good at palpating. And you take that same ability to take in sensation, and in the context of you're at home on your couch with a shell instead of a human being, you can notice, oh, it's very pleasant, this shell. Like I can rub it along my hand, I can run my fingertips on it, and you start to notice that it's pleasant. And that, for many people, creates, there's very often an emotional response of some kind. Surprise, delight, sadness is very common that will come up. And when people started having these emotional responses, that told me that we're onto something here. Like something's going on in there that is meaningful. And so I now do that with all my people. And some people it takes a few moments, some people it takes a few minutes, some people it takes weeks.
Reminds me so much of the feelings. It is the feelings that come up for people when they're touched, when they come to their body. The same thing happens, but you're talking about it evoke through the hands, or actually touching, and what happens in the hands. And I do this now before I teach people how to touch another person for their enjoyment, for their own enjoyment, because the nerve pathways from the hand to the brain have to be open. And for many people, they're not. Well, of course, the nerves are there. It's the brain connections that are happening. The hand connections are already there neurologically, but so waking up the ability of your hands to experience enjoyment with their sensation. That was the distinction that really made me realize I was so used to one mode of touching appropriately. Absolutely. But that in my life, say, or in my wholeness as a nervous system, there was a lot to learn. And for most body workers, we spend so much time touching for the other person's benefit, as we should. And switching gears to touching someone for your own benefit is often very difficult, because we've trained ourselves so well to not go there. And of course, it's not appropriate with your clients. It's appropriate with your lover. Right. Or a practice buddy. Who knows? But it's you talk about how it's a felt sense too. how it's very much a different body state,
Yeah. Yes.
that
Yeah.
the different directionality
Yeah.
of that pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
do you mind telling us a little more about your trainings? Like who goes to them? What percentage of that of body workers? What are they going for? That kind of thing.
The trainings that I offer now are 5-day trainings called Like a Pro.
Yeah.
It started out 15 years ago, mostly for sex workers, because I realized that I had some professional experience as a chiropractor that would be useful for sex workers, many of whom, some have had other professional experience, but some hadn't. And it started out mostly sex workers taking the class. And then we started getting massage therapists and sexological body workers and other kinds of body workers, lomi and different stuff. And then it started expanding. And then we started getting, therapists. And we've had several physicians and counselors and coaches and teachers. And now it's probably about half hands-on and half not hands-on. We get a lot of therapists these days.
Talk therapists,
A
yeah.
lot of talk therapists.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, a lot of other kinds of body workers and somatic educators and somatic experiencing practitioners. And,
Trauma
it's all
workers, yeah.
people who are into the body in some way.
Mm.
And therapists are not going to be touching if they're talk therapists, they're not going to be touching their clients, but they may be guiding their clients and touching each other at home or something.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and because the work comes from a background of working with sexuality, we're very open in talking about sex, and there's usually some sex workers in the group, and we address it very openly, just as we have here. And so it's built on this legacy of sex work. Yeah.
Good to be clear about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what are they coming for? I mean, especially those.
That's a really good question. What'd you come for?
I came because, I just stumbled across one of your YouTubes, and I recognized an adept teacher in you. I mean, I'm a teacher, and I think one of my roles is to help simplify complex things for people. And I spend a lot of time figuring out how to do that. And I recognized a particular genius in you. And I just want to bow down to you in that sense too.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. So it was a part of my own inquiry into who am I in all these realms at this stage in my life, the circumstances I'm finding myself in. How am I enlivened by the roles I have, and what haven't I lived yet? What haven't I experienced yet?
Yeah. Beautiful.
And professional curiosity about what is happening to us that we don't make room for intimacy in the same way, or this reactivity around, rightly so in many ways, like I said, the boundary questions around sex.
Yeah.
How does that affect me personally? So that's what brought me to your door. And it helped me gain very clear conceptual maps, find new experiences, really understand where I'm learning and where I get to grow.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Well, that's why most people come. Not necessarily for my brilliance, but it's the training in using the wheel of consent with your client.
Yeah.
And so it's the first 2.5 days or so are about you, so that you experience each of the quadrants of the wheel of consent in your own body. And then we open it up and talk more about the principles and how to teach it and how to share it with your clients. And like you're describing, what is your role in a session? And what contributes to you being able to stay in your role in integrity? And also, how's it affecting your personal life? Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Right. It's all clothed. There's nothing sexy happening in the training.
Mhm.
And yeah,
But the door is open to all of the learnings and lessons and applications from
yes,
that side
absolutely.
of yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
Okay, so you wrote a cool book called The Art of Receiving and Giving. Anything else you want to
Yes.
bookmark here on the way out about how people can find out more about you and your work?
Yeah, wheelofconsentbook.com is where you can find the book and about me, and it'll link you to my website is bettymartin.org. The school where all the teaching happens from is schoolofconsent.org.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find me on YouTube as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. We'll link some of those ones you've mentioned. We'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Anything else you
Thank
want
you.
to say? Thank you.
No,
Anything else you want
thank
to
you
leave us
for
with?
this conversation. It's been quite enjoyable.
It really has. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time.
Yeah, you're so welcome.
Okay, our closing sponsor, thanks to them too. Books of Discovery has been a part of massage therapy education for over 20 years. Thousands of schools around the world teach with their textbooks, e-textbooks, and digital resources. Books of Discovery likes to say, learning adventures start here. They see that same spirit here on the Thinking Practitioner podcast, and they're proud to support our work, knowing we share the mission to bring the massage and bodywork community enlivening content that advances our profession. Check out their collection of e-textbooks and digital learning resources for pathology, kinesiology, anatomy, and physiology at booksofdiscovery.com, where thinking practitioners save by entering thinking at checkout. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Stop by our sites for show notes, transcripts, and extras. And I think we're going to have a video of this one if it works out. Whitney's site, Whitney will be back in a future episode. His site is academyofclinicalmassage.com. My site, advanced-trainings.com. If there are questions or things you'd like to hear us talk about, guests you'd like to hear us interview, feedback you have for us, email us at info@thethinkingpractitioner or look for us on social media just under our names, Till Luca and Whitney Lowe. Please do rate us on Apple Podcasts. Take a second for that. That really helps the show have a bigger reach, helps more people find out about it, and gives our sponsors actually good feedback about you listening and being worth their support. So if you can take a second and rate us on Apple Podcasts, that helps us and everybody else. You can find us on Spotter, Stitchify, Google Podcasts, wherever else you listen. Thanks for sharing the word, telling a friend, and thanks for listening today.